As COVID cases surge, school districts scramble to protect kids. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the USA Today Ohio Network, Joseph Mas of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, and Michael Miller, former Franklin County prosecutor. Ohio has not seen COVID spread like this since January. At the start of the summer, back in June, Ohio was seeing about 200 cases a day. Now we're seeing about 6,000 new cases a day. Needless to say, the CDC has all of Ohio in its highest level of spread category, but that applies to nearly all of the country. Hospitalizations are a good metric to gauge the status of the fight, and there the news is not good. Ohio is seeing 10 times the number of COVID hospitalizations that we saw back in early July. And it's not just old people going to the hospital. Doctors are seeing more and more kids admitted with COVID.
Something of a silver lining about a year ago was that the kids were getting infected but weren't getting particularly sick. That's starting to change now. It feels different now. A year ago, we would have a handful of kids in the hospital who were with us for other conditions and happened to have COVID. Now what we're starting to see is kids in the hospital, including the ICU, who are there because of COVID, with things like respiratory failure and other effects.
Laura Bischoff, the kids in the hospital story is alarming. The big policy issue the past month or so has been, should schools require masks? And you're starting to see schools change the policies because of the spread.
Right. Ohio has about 1.8 million kids in K-12, about half of whom are not eligible for the vaccines just yet. And of course, last year, masks were nearly universal in the classrooms and seemed to be pretty effective. That's the message that the governor keeps saying, is that, it worked last year. We should go ahead and do it again this year. And if your kid is eligible to get vaccinated, then go ahead and make that happen. This year, the masking decisions are being left up to the districts, and we do have kind of a patchwork of policies. It does seem as the cases ramp up that more districts are moving toward mask mandates.
Yeah, Licking Valley High School had to shut down for a while. Hilliard had sort of mask optional for some kids. Now everyone's got to wear a mask in all of their schools, and that was that was a big source of contention in a lot of the districts, especially in the rural areas or in the suburban areas around Ohio. Michael Miller, in your travels, are you seeing more and more folks wearing masks? Are people taking this seriously? How concerned are you and folks you hang around with?
Well, of course, I'm concerned. I fortunately got my booster shot a couple of days ago, and I am seeing, I believe, more people wearing masks. There's that, period when things were looking pretty well that you could go into certain stores like, Kroger's and Walmart, that type of thing. And it was optional, and I think probably the majority of the people didn't have them on. Now it seems to be a lot more people wearing them than have worn them, 6 weeks ago, which I'm glad to see, and I hope it just grows from that.
Joe Mas, Franklin County Courthouse, place where you are often, is requiring masks now. Just another sign that this pandemic is still with us, very much still with us.
It is. That's correct, Mike. One thing that they also did is that they split up the cases that normally appear on a day-to-day basis, and those for minor traffic violations were now assigned for in the afternoon, something that, to my knowledge, we've never done before. But it's my understanding, at least according to the security personnel with whom I spoke on Wednesday, they claim that after this weekend that they're going to go back to having everybody be there at the same time. I think it's bad timing to do that. I hate the 1 o'clock bifurcation, but at the same time, I think we need to pay attention to what's going on. Way too many people in Ohio are still unvaccinated.
Laura Bischoff, lawmakers really are not doing much yet. They'll start to come back after Labor Day to get back into session. And when they do, they were poised to discuss, vote on several proposals to ban mandates, both mask and vaccine mandates. Has this surge, in your understanding, has it changed the thinking on that? Has it made basically Republican lawmakers more vigilant that they have to ban these mandates, or are they going to, cool it for a while until this surge passes?
Well, I don't think that it's cooled them at all. House Bill 248 got a hearing last month, August. That's a bill that would eliminate mandates, would kind of weaken longstanding vaccine laws, such as requiring students who go to college campuses and live in dormitories that they have to have proof of meningitis vaccine, also, Ohio's got a bunch of exemptions that are in current law, and this bill would require K-12 schools to spell those exemptions out to parents so that they could exercise the reason of conscience, which is sort of a catch-all exemption. So that bill is still it's still in the hopper, and the only thing that's really put a chill on it isn't so much of this, the numbers going up or anything like that. It's that the Chamber of Commerce and the Ohio Business Roundtable are putting a full court press to try to kill the bill. Employers really don't like the idea that they can't have requirements for their employees, such as wearing masks or attesting that they've been vaccinated or that sort of thing.
Mike Miller, what do you think about that? Should businesses be able to decide for themselves, do you land on the side of this sort of freedom? You should be free to choose for yourself whether you get vaccinated, whether you wear a mask.
Oh, I think the businesses should be able to do that. If people don't want to come into business, they don't have to do that. I believe the business people should have the opportunity to mandate masks if that's what they feel is correct. I feel like anybody should be able to do that because this thing is killing, what are we now, 30,000 people have died in the country, and Ohio rates are going up. Franklin County rates are going up from what we've had, a few weeks ago. So it hasn't gone away. It's again, I don't understand the vaccination things other than perhaps people with religious views. I believe the studies we saw recently that locally, out of the people, maybe it's Ohio, out of the people in the hospital, it's 8 or 9% have been vaccinated, and now the people, and that means 91, 92 have not. And out of the people who have succumbed to this plague, it's like 1.2% have been vaccinated. So
yeah.
Again, I don't understand why people don't get vaccinated, and I think business people should have the right to say, you can't come in here unless you have a mask on.
Laura Bischoff, when the Vax-A-Million lottery ran its course, there was some talk. The governor suggested he might be offering some additional incentives for people to get vaccinated. We haven't seen a whole lot from the governor or the administration on that. We've seen private industry doing it, like Children's Hospital here in Columbus is offering bonuses to staff who get vaccinated. But any word from the State House on additional incentives to try to boost those vaccination numbers?
No, the last thing we saw was that there was an incentive for state employees. If they showed proof of vaccination, they could get a $100 bonus, and their spouses could get, I think, $25. And there wasn't a big uptick in state employees that were actually claiming that little bonus. It was interesting what Michael Miller was saying about the anti-vaxxers or the people who they just don't want to get vaccinated. There was a story in the New York Times recently that talked about how the anti-vaccination movement really changed its approach from blaming vaccines for autism, which was a totally debunked allegation, to framing their issue into more of a matter of medical choice and medical freedom. And the movement had already been making inroads, and then, the 2020 pandemic hit, and it really ramped up the messaging, and the movement against vaccines or against vaccine mandates really ramped up their messaging and found willing listeners and supporters, including a lot of state lawmakers in Ohio and elsewhere.
Yeah, it could have consequences long down the road, long after this pandemic hopefully is behind us. Another big story, redistricting maps for Ohio House and Senate districts are starting to emerge, but they are not the maps that likely will count. Good government groups have proposed maps, Senate Democrats have presented maps, but the lawmakers in charge, Republican leaders at the State House and the Republicans on the Redistricting Commission, say they are still working on their maps, even though a new redistricting process is supposed to encourage bipartisan cooperation. Democrats and Republicans do not appear to be working together. Joe Mas, they missed a deadline on Wednesday. It was kind of a soft deadline, September 1st, to come up with a map. Next deadline, the harder deadline's 10 days away. What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to get maps by then?
Yeah, I think it's on the 15th that is the hard deadline. And I think they'll come up with something. But, I think the backstory on this is so interesting because they're supposed to be working together, both the Republicans and the Democrats. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Not only that, but it doesn't seem like the legislators themselves, in other words, the members of the commission, are actually working on the maps either. That there may be designated hitters, staff members who may be working on this. And the Democrats, both named Sykes, have come up with a map that, interestingly enough, does give some favorable treatment to Republicans, but at least it does provide for some swing vote districts that is an improvement over what we have today.
Yeah, that map closes the gap between Democrats and Republicans at the State House,
Right.
But the Republicans still have the advantage, as they likely do in the electorate. Laura Bischoff, what are Republicans saying is the holdup in the redistricting map thing?
Well, initially the holdup was that the census data didn't come through in time, and it wasn't going to get delivered until I think September 30th, and then there was a finally it came through a little bit earlier. Honestly, I think that the holdup is that they have these new rules that they're trying to understand and figure out which elements should get more weight, and I just don't think that either side is really that close to coming to an agreement. So there's probably a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes.
Mike Miller, I think the hope when this new system was approved and put into law, put into the Constitution, is that the two sides would maybe get into a room and try to hash this out, but it's not happening. I guess you have to say that's not terribly surprising, especially given the Republicans' advantage in elected offices in the state.
Well, I don't think it is surprising, Mike. It's nice to think that they would work together, but historically they haven't. Yeah, the Republicans are in charge, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure that the new map is beneficial to them. The Democrats would do absolutely the same thing if they were in charge. I remember, I know Joe would remember the date more than I, but a few years ago, maybe 10 years, something like that, they had something that looked like it was really going to work out. At the last minute, the Democrats pulled out because they thought they were going to win the November election. I don't blame them. I mean, they're trying to protect their party. The Republicans, again, would have done the same thing. They pulled out, they lost the election. Here we are. I hope that Laura's right, that they do compromise and come up with something. Otherwise, as I understand it, without two minority votes, Democrat votes, we don't get those two, then the Republicans get to draw the map, and it's good for 4 years instead of 10, and we start all over again. So I hope they compromise and do something, but human nature being what it is, I don't expect it.
Joe Mas, do they have an argument that a 4-year map would be better because the census numbers were so late? And okay, we'll do a map for 4 years and we'll come back when we have more data. Is that a legitimate argument, or is that just an excuse to maintain control?
I think it's an excuse, but I follow, as I usually do. I think I follow Mike Miller's argument and say that he's 100% correct. And by the way, Mike, that was 2009. When that happened, and I agree with you, and I was a strong and loud opponent to that for the simple reason that I thought it was the right thing to do to finally address the issue of redistricting. So here we are, and I agree with Mike that I think that perhaps inaction will be the winner here, and in fact they'll just say, let's just wait 4 more years, and then they'll have the 2 election cycle option instead. And the cynical part of me says that, gosh, I hope that's not the case. This is not that hard. This is not that hard.
But 4 years is a lifetime in politics these days. So, Anyway, it appears the 2022 race for Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice will come down to just 2 candidates. Supreme Court Justice Pat DeWine, the governor's son, says he will run for re-election to his current seat and not run for Chief Justice. That clears a Republican primary path for Justice Sherrod Kennedy, who would likely face Democrat and fellow Justice Jennifer Brunner. Laura Bischoff, what's the reason Pat DeWine, he was considering this, but he said, no, now is not the time. I'm going to stick with the seat that I'm in now, or at least try to get it back.
Well, Sharon Kennedy and Jennifer Brunner were more recently elected to the court, and so they can run with a cushion. They could run from safety. If they lose, they still remain on the court. Pat DeWine is because his term is up at the same time as the Chiefs race. He has to either go for the Chiefs position or go for justice, go for reelection. And so, his argument, his statement, and what he told Gannett newspapers is that it made sense to maintain the Republican majority on the court, which is 4 out of 7 seats right now. It made sense for him to just run for reelection. Also, I think that there was a chance that if Pat DeWine were to run against Sharon Kennedy and lose, or run in the general against Jennifer Brunner and lose, there could be a little window in which Mike DeWine could appoint Pat DeWine to either Brunner or Kennedy's vacant seats. That probably would not be a good look for the governor. Yeah,
that's my question to you, Mike. You think the DeWine name would be an advantage for Pat DeWine? His father is the governor, popular governor by all respects, except among conservatives on the far right of the Republican Party. Could the DeWine name be hurting Pat DeWine in a Republican primary for Supreme Court justice? Could that have been a factor?
I don't think so. I think Laura's got it absolutely right. He can't run from cover, and everybody else can. If he wins one of the 2 races, he's out. He can win the primary against Kennedy and lose the general, he has no seat. Or he can be opposite way, lose to Kennedy and he has no seat in the. So I think he's doing practically the right thing. I don't know Justice DeWine, but it seems to me I saw where he was saying he wanted to do his best to keep the conservative majority, and I'm sure that's true. But I also think it's just sort of practical politics that Sharon Kennedy, I think, would be a very formidable opponent, as would Jennifer Brunner. So I think he just felt it's too much of a risk. I've got a much better chance of being reelected for another 6-year term, and I'm going to stay here.
Joe Mas, Sharon Kennedy, she's going to be tough to beat for Jennifer Brunner. Jennifer Brunner's won statewide, good name recognition. Sharon Kennedy's won statewide, great Irish name, which is good for this race.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the analysis that Laura advanced is that I think it's correct. I think that it's much riskier for DeWine to take the step at the moment. But I think it also speaks well as to how seriously they take Jennifer Brunner's candidacy. Justice Brunner in the past has won statewide office. I have followed her closely and in person at times, and her campaigns. And I think that she's going to advance a very serious challenge to the Chief Justice's position, and perhaps have a Democrat there for the first time in a while. So that's the issue, and just too risky. The timing is just not right for Justice DeWine to throw his hat in the ring. Can wait for another time, perhaps.
Laura Bischoff, there was a move to put party affiliations next to these justice candidates' names. Where does that stand? Is that going to happen in 2022?
To be determined, but I would not be surprised if that happens. I was going to say also, just back to the Chiefs position, this is a job that only comes open every now and then. Maureen O'Connor, a Republican, she's held it since 2011. And you only get 1 vote out of the 7 on the Supreme Court. But the chief does kind of set the agenda and the tone, and can kind of focus the judiciary on major issues. And Maureen O'Connor gave a speech this week, the state of the judiciary, and she talked about bail reform, preventing evictions, and criminal justice data. So it kind of shows, where her focus is going to be in the next 15 months as she finishes out her term.
Yes, not exactly the hardcore conservative issues she's addressing there, even though she is a Republican. Smoking or ingesting marijuana for fun could be on the ballot in 2022. The group pushing for legalizing recreational cannabis this week won ballot board approval to start collecting signatures to change state law. The group has decided not to try to change the state constitution, so it does not need as many signatures as it would then. It needs to gather, however, 133,000 valid voter signatures. Then the proposal would go to lawmakers. If lawmakers do not enact the proposal as is or sit on it, the group would go back out for another 133,000 signatures, and if successful, it would be on next November's ballot for voters to decide. The group wants Ohio to treat legal marijuana like it regulates alcohol. Mike Miller, the latest polls, nationally about 66% of Americans support legalizing marijuana recreationally. The last poll I saw in Ohio was a few years old, but it was about 53% of Ohioans support it. What do you think happens if this gets on the ballot in 2022?
Well, I suppose it depends on how it's approached. I would say it has a very good chance of passing in 2022. And I'm not sure it's going to get there. I think the Republicans and the Democrats have a better chance of working this out than they do redistricting. I think everybody would like to. And it just keeps changing, more and more states and communities are in favor of legalizing marijuana. And I think if they come up with something that, in my judgment, is reasonable, that the Republicans will pass it, the Democrats will join them, and there will no need for a ballot in 2022. But if they don't, then I would say if they make a reasonable request, it would pass in 2022.
Just imagine what marijuana would do to the redistricting process if that was included right now. The line might be a little fuzzy, but they might be more fair. Anyway, Laura Bischoff, is there talk at the State House? Medical marijuana, that's what happened. There was a ballot threat, and the lawmaker said, we'll take care of it. Will that happen now, or is this legislature too conservative for fully legalizing pot in Ohio?
You're right. The legislature is very conservative, but I think Michael Miller is correct in that it would be popular. And I think the lesson learned on the medical marijuana side, where they will make the ballot, and the legislature then will not have control over the parameters of the proposal, probably would convince some conservatives to go ahead and craft some sort of a legal recreational marijuana law right out of the gate. I think that 133,000 signatures is a big lift, but given how much weed I smell when I'm out and about in Ohio, I would think that it is going to be a very popular petition to sign, and it will drive voter turnout in November 2022.
Yeah, and there's some big name political consultants and a petition gathering firm apparently has been signed on by the supporters of this. Joe Mas, the Congress is talking about this. It's going to be a while, but there's more and more people thinking that the federal government's going to legalize marijuana, recreational marijuana. Why not wait for the feds to do it?
Well, I'm not sure that necessarily having the feds do it unless they preempt action on marijuana, which I don't think that whatever it is that they do would do so. I don't think it makes any sense to stop. Now, on this program, I have recently predicted that I believe that Ohio will have legal recreational use of marijuana within the next 2 years. And interesting observation and follow up to Laura's comment. As you know, I travel often to California, Colorado, and Michigan, where it is legal, and I smell marijuana more on the street in Columbus, Ohio, than I do in Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids.
Real quick, Mike Miller, you've been a prosecutor for a long time, an attorney for a long time. The sea change is incredible when you think about the 70s and 60s when how marijuana was viewed.
Now, Mike, let me tell you, when I started down the prosecutor's office as an assistant in 1971, I mean, this is going to be hard to believe, but possession of marijuana, now, I can't remember if they needed any amount or a certain amount, but not much, was 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Sale of marijuana, cigarette, 2 cigarettes, joints, whatever you want to call them, 20 to 40. World's changed a great deal in the last 50 years. And in this situation, I think it's changed for the best.
Yeah, a lot of folks in prison still because of those laws. Anyway, it's time now for our final off-the-record parting shots. And Mike Miller, we'll start with you.
Well, I just think that after Ohio State's victory last night, in a next year or two, they may have an away game with Bishop Sycamore, and it should be exciting, and we'll see what happens.
Bishop Sycamore, the school that got beat 58-0. We're not quite sure what that school's all about. Joe Mas, what's your final thought?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that Mike mentioned Bishop Sycamore, because I'm going full philosophical on my closing comments. That particular episode, that story that is developing, reminds us that in the 21st century, the lines between fact and fiction have permanently blurred. A school is a school if I say it is. If you question the legitimacy of my claims, then you're challenging my faith or my freedom. All opinions are of equal weight as long as they are closely held belief. God help us all.
And Laura, your final thought.
I would just like to extend condolences to the friends and family of Doug Green. He was a Republican who served in the House and also served in Brown County offices. I tallied it up. I think he was a public servant for 35 years. He died recently at the age of 66 after contracting COVID.
Yes, condolences to his family. As for Bishop Sycamore, I think we're going to see some changes in state law, some additional regulations, oversight on these prep schools that apparently are created first to field the football team, and then maybe there's a class or two involved. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. Check us out at our website, wosu.org, where you can watch us on your time. You can watch us on demand. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.